Hello and welcome to another Chatbox podcast. It's episode 59 of the Chatbox podcast. How are you doing today? Right, let's crack on. As you know, each week I have a guest to talk about their career or their job. So let's crack on with this week's guest. It's broadcaster Mark Chadwick on the line. Hello, Mark.
Hello, brother. How you doing, Ben?
I'm fine, thank you. Welcome along.
Thanks very much for inviting me, mate.
How are you today?
I'm all right. I'm not too bad. I'm in the middle of my daughter's birthday. Not today. She had it a few days ago. It's my birthday, my fiance's father's birthday. It's my son's birthday next week. It's expensive time at the minute, mate. And so I'm all right. So thanks for dropping me all this money for the interview.
Who knows? Yeah, who knows? It may even go up if you answer the questions goodly.
If I perform well, anything you want, mate. Anything you want.
As Danny Milo said, where's the £1 million?
Danny Milo. I like Danny.
He wanted £1 million from me.
Did he? I take it you didn't cough up.
No, because this is for free, you see. Lol.
Yeah.
Anyway, 5 questions, if that's okay with you, about broadcasting.
You can fire away, my friend.
You ready to rumble in the jungle?
I sure am.
Let's go for it. Question 1. Where did you start your broadcast career?
My broadcast career officially, where I got paid, that was at Peak 107 in Chesterfield. And it was a radio station my dad had set up, actually. And I joined it about 2 years after he set up. I was doing technical operations, basically just using the desk, and I was operating the sports show. I forgot what we used to call it. Tech op, that was it. I used to tech op the sports show. And it still to the day is the most technical live studio setup I've ever been in terms of it's frantic, but it was so much fun. So yeah, Peak 107, Chesterfield was the start of my career in 2000.
Is that the famous person who's in charge of YO1 radio in York at the moment, who was in charge of Peak?
Yeah, that is Wayne.
Mr. Wayne Chadwick.
Mr. Wayne Chadwick, indeed. Well, that guy, that doofus, is my dad.
He's coming on the podcast in a few weeks.
Is he? Maybe I should leave you a message to give him. He answers probably your calls quicker than I answer mine.
Took me twice to get into contact with him because I've been trying to get him on a podcast, and I know a few people who worked under him at Peak FM who I've interviewed on this very podcast.
Yeah. Peak. There's quite a few people. So Naz, I think, was one on your podcast, wasn't he?
Mr.
Goldsmith, sure, and of course, who's now at Virgin.
And North Derbyshire Radio, which is owned by Naz Premji.
Yes.
And Stuart Nicholson as well.
Do you know that I started on the breakfast show at North Derbyshire Radio?
Did you?
Yeah, I did the first breakfast show on the launch day.
Thought that was Naz Premji who was in charge of that.
It is. I was in the breakfast show for one day before they fired me.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yeah, I've had Wayne, a person who works alongside your dad, Chris Marsden, as well on this very podcast.
Six Bellies. Yeah, apparently he's lost some weight recently, old Six Bellies. He's just called One Belly, Chris One Belly Marsden. He told me he lost 6 pounds in a week. I asked him if he wanted any money transferring into his bank.
Anyway, I was trying to get Wayne Chadwick on a podcast, but he said early September because I think he's away for a few weeks.
Yeah, he's going to Barbados.
Yeah, that's good.
No doubt Barbados will then go onto the red list, and then he'll have to quarantine there and here and in Manchester, which means he won't actually be available for 3 months.
Yeah, who knows? Who
Sorry.
knows? I
Yeah,
didn't know
sorry.
you were related before this podcast.
Yeah, we are related. We are related. And thick as thieves. Maybe just thick, not thieves.
Yeah, because I've had loads of guests like, anyway, we're talking about you, not me. So let's get on
I'll
with
talk
it.
about anything. I'll talk about anything.
There was I've had Sean Goldsmith and his co-presenter from Breakfast. I had Naz Premji.
Yeah, Sean. I like Sean. Sean's
I
a
had
good
Sean
guy out of work.
Goldsmith's co-presenter.
Becky?
Yeah.
Becky.
Do you know Stuart Nicholson then?
Yes.
Who's
The
in
name.
charge of TX1?
No, I didn't know that. I knew the
It
name.
used to be part of the YO1 group,
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, TX1.
RB1.
Yeah. I don't know what happened with all those.
They were part of Chris Marsden's little venture, the Postcode Radio Network, I think.
Yes, they were. And that's
but now
when.
Stuart Nicholson's in charge.
Yeah, I understand that. So yeah, when Wayne took over the group, that previous group didn't retain all the stations, I believe.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think retain all the stations. So if Stuart's running TX1, then that's not part of that same group anymore.
I was hoping to talk to him in the future about syndication, that's all. And he had another good friend.
Syndication will be an important, even a more important subject in the future, I think, as all these online brands develop. I think the need to get syndicated shows to fill, sort of like non-local time is really important. So yeah. Anyway, started my career at Peak. That was the answer to the question, wasn't it?
Yeah, one of lots of my friends have been through the Peak doors.
Yeah, it was a good station. It was a really good station. It's a shame it doesn't exist anymore.
Sean Goldsmith, now he doesn't do anything for Chesterfield Radio anymore. I was told he's doing a bit more for North Derbyshire.
Right. Yeah, Sean's quite busy. I think he did voice tracks as well, so it's good.
I was told he was doing a desk job, but Naz Premji offered him a job at North Derbyshire and he took it.
Right. I mean, North Derbyshire Radio is not going to be paying anyone's not going to be paying anyone any money.
No, I think he took Sean Goldsmith on board.
Right. What, to stop him working at Boots?
I'm not sure
I think Sean's getting paid decent, I think, at Virgin. He's got a few little gigs going. I think he was working at
he was working at Greatest Hits full time until they decided
before that, but then he's been doing quite a lot of voice tracking, I think, recently. He's picked up, so he's on a few stations now.
Yeah, he's on Virgin. He's doing cover for Steve Priestley the next 2 weeks on Greatest Hits.
Right, got you. Cool.
But he's doing it down at Radio Air.
Yeah, I remember Radio Air. I used to do the evening show at Radio Air.
Wow. What era was that?
I replaced, so when was it? It was in 2004. I replaced Matt Robinson. Was his name Matt Robinson? He did the evening show at Radio Air about 2004. I replaced him, and I literally replaced him for 2 weeks. And then I was offered a job at Galaxy, while I was in my third day on air at Radio Air. There were no windows in the station. It was horrible. The place didn't feel great. I was on my own at night as well. The people in the station were great, but I never saw them because I was on at night. And it was so dingy, the studio at the time. And I got this call from Galaxy that offered me the job and went, "Boof, do you want it?" I was like, "Yep, I'll definitely take that." So I think I was done within the week, I think, and I started at Galaxy like the following week.
Galaxy. The Galaxy 105, the Yorkshire's hit music station. Now that's capital.
Yeah, it's more like number one for dance and R&B, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You
I
know,
remember
real,
that. I love the logo of Galaxy.
yeah, it was cool. The purple one, purple and black.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked good. Looked really, really good. I remember I remember there being sort of like a Galaxy in Spain and a Galaxy in New Zealand. And they weren't part of the group. They were just people who nicked the brand and the logo just to call their own radio stations Galaxy. So it
Were
must
you
have been
under
quite
Scott
powerful.
Myers?
What do you mean, was I under Scott Myers?
Were you working under Scott Myers? Because he was in charge of Capital Galaxy at one point.
Oh, was he? No, I never made it to Capital. So I left in the Galaxy days. I left in 2006.
What was your... Did you go on to bigger and better things?
Yeah, I think in some respects I did. In other, I mean, so I didn't go on to bigger and better things in terms of imaging production. Sort of, we'd been nominated for a few Sony Awards, and we'd, for the first time, been nominated for an imaging Sony Award, which hadn't happened in history. And then, anyway, we didn't win it, but it felt like a real achievement to even get there. And the sort of person that I am, I get very bored and fidgety quick. And so my need to carry on at Galaxy sort of went diminished. And so I got an offer to be Kiss's station voice for the network. And even though they were paying me less money than Galaxy were, because Kiss was sort of like king of UK CHR, I felt like, because all the decisions of casting were made by producers, I felt like if you were attached to, the coolest youth brand radio station in the country, opposed to maybe the second coolest at the time, then that would be better. And so I gave my notice as a voiceover. And at the time as well, I was developing a lot of work, which I was doing out of work, voiceover wise. Galaxy was it was the most prominent voiceover job for me because it was the network. And so the audience was huge and a lot bigger than ever done before. And the exposure that I got from that, work started coming in all over from different places, from just other imaging projects, production to voice and production, to then I was doing like in-store stuff. I was making hour-long radio CDs essentially for people to play in shopping centers. It was weird, the sort of work that came in. Started working with Subway, as in the sandwich shops, Superdrug, a lot of in-store places. And I found that was actually quite lucrative, a lot of money to be made there. And because I liked radio a lot, and I liked doing my own stuff a lot, I suddenly had this impulse to leave Galaxy. I was struggling with drug addiction at the time, to be honest with you. And so being able to stay at home and do that all day was much more appealing. And especially if I could take on the freelance work and carry on, for that, going in the direction it was. What I found was, when I actually left the job at Galaxy and I started the KISS contract with a voice, and I started a couple of contracts through station imaging. So I took on a group called the CN Radio Group, which had quite a few stations in it. And one of them was called City Beat in Ireland. And there was Touch FM, and there was about 17 of them, I think. And I did all the imaging for them for a while, a few years. And that was really good money. And as I found ways to make good money, but I started to cut corners, and the career started to take a bit of a drop and a bit of a hit, and I couldn't keep off the drugs and on work. And so in about 2010, after the voiceover jobs, big contracts had dried up and my work had sort of kind of depleted because of my out of work problems, I suddenly got this opportunity to be Bauer's voice which was, I think it was about 19 stations at the time. Key, Viking, Air, Hallam, TFM, you know, all of them. And so I went down to Leeds and I did the audition in Leeds. And at the time, mate, I'd got a retainer for Juice in Liverpool, and I was getting bits of work come through, but I dropped off the radar big time. I was living with my dad because money was bad, and I was just sort of declining. And I went to Leeds and did this audition, and I walked out. And then on the way to the train station from Leeds to do the big city voiceover audition, I got a phone call from the scriptwriter at Hallam FM that said, "Do you want to do creative? As in, do you want to write scripts?" And I was like, "Could I write the scripts and do voiceovers?" And he went, "Yeah, as long as it doesn't interfere with your work." And at that point, I was like, I could stop all the drugs. I got a feeling that I've got this gig, which was going to pay me like 21 grand a year, which was amazing because I'd had insecurity for so long. And then this job I was going to take up in Sheffield was also a full-time paid job, which I could take simultaneously at the same time. And then the profile of getting the big city job and the script writer and that stuff, it kicked things off again for me in about 2010. And even though my problems with drugs continued, the work actually seemed to improve and get a lot better. And I found some sort of stability. It wasn't until about 2014 where I was doing voiceovers full time at a level where I was proud of. I'd started doing TV work. I hadn't done that before. I'd been limited to radio. But I really broadened my horizons in about 2014 when I, you know, found the time to make a demo and make the right demos. And since then, well, I've been doing sound design. So I produce sound design libraries. I still do the voiceovers, imaging, and commercial. Actually, any voiceovers I'm normally given, I will do, as long as I don't strongly disapprove of the product, which, you know, I'm being asked to sell. Quite principled in the way that if a product does, I don't like it, I don't like the message, and I think it's wholly wrong, then I will refuse the work and I won't do it. Yeah, I don't know if that's answered your question. I always seem to go on a bit of a ramble.
Yeah, you should go and work for your dad in YO1 radio sometime.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, I'm doing some work for him for YO1 next week. Actually, they're going there at Leeds Festival, and so I'm in the media tent at Leeds Festival, so I'm doing some interviews and stuff, and then we'll be pre-packaging that and then sending it back to Chris Marsden, who will be at the station doing his show. So you weren't too wrong in your prediction.
They should give you, your dad should really give you a slot.
I'd love one, mate. I'd love one. I thought I'd gone off radio presenting. But I definitely haven't. I haven't. I've definitely, there's a lot to say. I've always got a lot to say.
And we hadn't even reached the second question yet.
I know. See, exciting. I knew I'd be online the longest, by the way.
Well, one of my guests went on for an hour and 17 minutes because we started talking about the history of radio and all that. Oh,
wow. Wow, the history of radio. When you only filled an hour and 17.
No, it was about Case. It was about all the different stations because I think the person who I was interviewing has autism like me, but he studied a degree in radio, I think.
Right. Okay, cool.
And he lived all the way down in London, and he's a very intelligent person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a radio analysis person.
Yeah, that seems to be.
I didn't know until someone from Peak told me that your dad owned Peak.
Yeah, he did back in the day.
And I didn't know you were his son until today.
Yeah, he sold it in about 2001, 2002.
To the
So
UTV.
to Forever Broadcasting, and Forever Broadcasting end up selling to UTV. Yeah.
So he was
Broadcasting
the founder of Peak FM.
He was the founder, the original OG.
Wow, that's brilliant.
I mean, when you interview him, you'll find out he loves radio. You know, he took a break for a bit, but he loves it.
I was going to ask him about, because I thought Chris Marsden was still in charge of YO1.
No, not the running of YO1, but I know Chris is obviously critical in the way that YO1's run and in the programming, the choices and stuff like that.
I asked Chris Marsden about potential syndication the other week. And he said local content.
Yeah, I think local content's key in the times that where people expect local content. But anything, in the wee small hours of the night, I think syndication is especially important to get good content out there on a budget to people who work at that time.
If your dad or Mr. Marsden wants me to do a syndication for different stations and they want to take my syndication on board for the middle of the night, I do not mind.
I'll let them know.
Because I'm hoping to get this show and another show I do syndicated.
Well, good luck with it, mate. I hope it gets syndicated. I hope you're everywhere. I'd much prefer to hear you than Piers Morgan.
I'm not going to say that word on air about him.
We can say that our priorities are all wrong as human nature, mate. I'm all for more you.
I prefer James Whale, if I'm honest with you.
He's a good guy.
Oh, yeah, because Piers Morgan's just an outdated version of James Whale.
Yeah, it's like he's an outdated version of an outdated.
Do you know when Piers Morgan did his famous stomp off?
Yes.
James Whale said, I did that better in the radio air lobby back in the 1980s.
Yeah, it's definitely something. It's definitely not some behavior that transpose very well in modern time, did it? Stomps off, especially someone like him who can dish it out, but as soon as he hears something back, he's not prepared to engage in it.
James Whale said, I did it better in the 80s because I think James Whale stormed off the stage and never came back.
All these kids, all these kids storming off. Why can't everyone just sit and have a chat?
Like me and you.
Like me and you, mate, exactly. Come on then. Question 2.
Question 2. Who are your inspirations in broadcasting growing up?
So I was not someone really who was influenced by presenters. So I'd say probably one of the presenters who I was influenced by would be Dr. Fox, who you've interviewed before, Neil. I never had any interest for these people off air at all, to be honest with you. It was only on air. I liked what Neil did in terms of animating the sound. He was very good at animating the sound and using the audio and beds and IDs and just stuff. He could, his ability to be able to feel the audio and to feel part of the experience, and he had that sort of voice which was so right for the time as well. It sounded great, you know. Hype and the Pepsi chart, you know, that's about as close as we got to that iconic American sound of imaging from sort of like the 90s. And I think Neil was part of that, and so he would be one of my influences. But as a voiceover, I'd say that voiceover and production is obviously where I've concentrated most of my life. Presenting in stages, but I haven't really done much of that for about 15 years. I would say that a voiceover called Don LaFontaine, who is one of the original 5 Hollywood voiceover, in another world where lust becomes love, you know, those old school typical like voiceovers. Him, I loved his delivery. He was so rich and authentic, and there was a quote and a way that he was but essentially the quote was that it's different reading something, but it's really something to understand what you're reading. And that really stuck with me from when I was very young. And I was loving this whole industry. You know, I wasn't someone who listened to lots of radio shows. I liked Howard Stern in America, but I wasn't someone who was obsessed with radio. I was someone who was obsessed with movie trailers. And so the sound of those things specifically really excited me.
Yeah, you've said brilliantly, and also there's a lot of voiceover artists out there like yourself.
There's a load of voiceovers out there, isn't there? I think you can pick up some tips from a lot of people.
I think that also, as you say, there's Chris Marsden, I think, who does a lot of voiceover.
Yeah, probably.
And Stephanie Hess does a bit of voiceover.
Yeah.
I think she did a voiceover because I saw some showreel somewhere, and she did it for Sky.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
and that's some demonstration, whereas, you know, that's a bit of inclusion, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, because I try and always, because sometimes if ever I'm watching the telly, I sometimes think, I recognise that voice. That voice.
Yeah. I used to do that all the time. It's like I listen to the radio or the TV and I'm like, yeah. Hey, Eliza. Hi, Claire. There's Gab. You know, it's like, I know they are. I know who they are.
Brilliant. Nice. We'll move on to question 3 now. What is your favourite part about the job?
What's my favourite part about the job? I would honestly say it's quite simple. It's the fact that it's not very time consuming in the bursts, and I do it from home in a spare room in a booth, and I set my own prices, I set my own working hours, and I don't have to write the scripts that I read. I literally get sent scripts, I have to record them. A lot of the time, the client trusts me enough to not even have to be there live, and I send them back. And then I get paid more money than it's really worth to actually do that. And for someone who's been stacking a shelf for that hour, and I've been doing a voiceover, it's staggering how I can command the money for an hour where I've not moved. And so that is mental, and it's a product of the society that we have created. And I'm not saying I'm a big fan of that, but I'm going to cash in on it. And so the best thing about this job has to be, if you can get the work, it's pretty easy. And
I'm actually thinking about going into voiceover in the future.
Yeah, and if you wanted to do that, then do it. Absolutely do it. Make sure you've got a good sound set up, and it doesn't sound, it doesn't sound bad. But most importantly, you hear a lot of people say that, it's like, oh, they've got my mum's got a good voice. Go on, listen to her voice. Can she be a voiceover? And I think what you learn a lot of the time is it's not about the voice. It's not just having the good voice. It's literally about an authentic delivery. And as I said, like Don LaFontaine said, understand the words you're saying. And if you can evoke that in what you're saying, so it conveys understanding and not reading, then then you can definitely do the job. So my advice to you, mate, would be read things, but read them like you're actually thinking them and like they're coming out of your mouth. And then when you get to a point when you can do it like that, you're ready to go.
Brilliant. What was the reason you got removed from North Derbyshire Radio, by the way?
That he, despite saying I got a free reign of content, I I spoke a bit too much and was a little bit too harsh about one of our own presenters, which was of course, for the purposes of radio, really. But and I got fired for it. Not warned, I got fired. But it was a good thing, to be fair, because I was hoping it was like a flurry into it was like gonna do some presenting, and then I kind of thought, yeah, actually I'm gonna do a bit of presenting, and I hadn't thought about it for ages. And then when actually I did the show, and then he went, oh, no more. I think within 5 minutes I was laughing about the whole thing, thinking, well, what was I doing anyway? Like,
you were probably a bit rusty because you hadn't done it for a while. That was all.
well, yeah, I mean, I was definitely probably rusty, that's for sure. But it wasn't the rustiness why he was firing me. He was firing me over my content and over my beliefs. And despite giving me a free rein to say what I wanted, even if it was shocking. And I did do that. And I granted what I said was probably shocking, but it wasn't illegal. And so a warning and a chat would have been a better way forward. But anyway, like, it's turned out fine. Like, it wasn't a serious thing. But what it did do is made me think, actually, I'd quite like to do some presenting. So I'm doing something while I'm at the Leeds Festival. And I've always got people, Capital in Birmingham a while ago were interested in me doing something with them. And there was a little bit of interest. So yeah, I'm going to present a demo because I do love presenting. And as long as I can, I just keep some of my opinions to myself. I think that's probably the best way forward.
I may look for a co-presenter in the future.
Yeah, that would be good fun. But good North Derbyshire, I mean, good luck to them. Good luck to them.
I have a lot of respect because some of my friends like Naz Premji, I don't know if you know Naz.
Yeah, he was the one that fired me.
And then now they have Mr. Goldsmith on board, so I have a lot of respect for them. And Naz Premji took your spot on my podcast yesterday. The original one we were supposed to record yesterday. Naz Premji came along first, sorry.
He's always been trying to fill my shoes. Naz is a good guy. Naz is a good guy, and I do wish him all luck. I think people
Sean Goldsmith's now got nothing, I don't think, to do with Chesterfield radio anymore.
Probably not.
Because, yeah, he's more doing Virgin Side of Life and other projects.
Yeah, I bet. I get behind on all the news, the radio news. I just don't keep in contact with it, in touch with it. I mean, most of my work, I think, is outside the UK now, so I don't know the gossip anymore. So sometimes Sam FM finally consolidated into Bauer the other day, and so I suddenly lost the contract, but I should have been paying more attention. But yeah, I don't really see everything coming. I don't really see the news. So the names and the brands, they're old ones, they're familiar. But the new stuff, I'm like, what's that? I mean, unless I've been a part of it, I'm sort of unaware.
Yeah, now that Global's buying into a lot of radio stations, it's a Bauer and Global dominated world now.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it. Absolutely. Homogenized, nothing local.
Bauer have a big lockdown in London, Soho Square, where Simon Mayo does his greatest hits program. They have Absolute and Magic based in there. Well, that building used to be Virgin.
Yeah.
And now Virgin are broadcasting out of the News UK building opposite the Shard.
Right. Okay.
Oh, but cool. They still have, but nothing's changed. They've just rebranded, but they still have Chris Evans on breakfast.
Yeah, cool. They'll always produce, good radio shows. I think my point is like, I think there is a demand now for local radio again. And I think when you see this DAB plus, and when you see these stations setting up and trying to be bigger than they were allowed to be, I think it's a good opportunity, because I think local radio's dying from a content perspective.
as a famous broadcaster says, I'm not going to reveal his name because he slated Bauer till the people come till a lot of my guests have slated Bauer because these people who have set up these new radio stations are just Bauer employees who have just been removed from the Bauer payroll.
Yeah.
And one of my friends actually got a email from Bauer thinking he was still a Greatest Hits radio presenter when he'd been given his notice a year earlier.
Yeah, there's a lot of casualties being caused, and I know a lot of people who will let go. I think it's sad.
And now they've took stock and they've set up their own stations.
Yeah, and in some ways, I think the big brands taking their eye off the local markets will be an eventual downfall in some ways for them.
And somebody actually said on one of my podcasts, there'll be a role reversal in a few years. They'll try and turn the tide, Bauer and Global.
I think as we become more and more into a world where the people consume internet radio, I mean, even in their cars through Apple Play, it's not hard to conceive that within a few years, internet radio and IP will just be available in cars. And FM, as you know, that's all being disbanded. Who says DAB is not going to go in the same direction, because the uptake's not great still. That's why they're flogging off the DAB B plus licenses for nothing.
I've been told a rumor by someone that Bauer are going to merge all their stations into one big region.
I don't know if that's true, but I mean, one brand, they make sense. They can get around competition law and all that. They'd have the same stuff running all day. They'd have
now most of their programming comes out of Manchester.
Yeah.
And Globals comes out of London.
Yeah.
It's a weird world we live in.
It is.
But local radio is going to thrive.
No, it's just we need more.
And it's a bit like Bauer leaving on the train and leaving the local stations to make market.
Yeah.
It's a bit like what you had the situation when ITV used to have 15 regional licenses. Yeah.
It's the problem. It's like all these individual licenses and stations had little markets, and then they all consolidated into sort of big market, 5 stations consolidate into one, blah, blah, blah. And then they become networks. And then essentially what you're doing is you can price out all the small competition because you dictate the spend in the markets because of the size of yourself. And so you can essentially saturate the competition's territories for a lot less money or the same money for more exposure. And it kind of creates a monopoly. And that's what the Monopoly Commission was meant to do, which was meant to sort of oversee how much of groups were in certain marketplaces so they didn't unfairly dictate market spend. And I think there's been a lot of underhanded stuff happen. And, sure enough, we're left with, 2 groups that essentially own the commercial market of the whole country. That's really worrying for me. I like a world that has lots of freely owned private radio stations with local content. And not these things where essentially your news output and your views on stuff nationally is coming from one central narrative. I never like that, mate.
Somebody actually said to me, a guest of mine on one of my previous podcasts, that COVID has accelerated this by a few years.
It definitely has. I think COVID has accelerated globalization by more than a few years, probably by an order of magnitude, compared with, on the track that it was. Whereas, with global problems, develop global solutions. And there's a lot of global problems that we're all going to be sharing as the fallout of COVID. And so the solutions to those, a bit like we're both on Zoom. No one knew about Zoom before the pandemic. And then now, you got kids doing school on Zoom. You got, I'm sure, probably got women being auctioned on Zoom. This is the world that we have been propelled into, whether we like it or not. But in radio's favor, for me, it doesn't increase the value of an FM transmitter at all. It doesn't increase the value of DAB. I think the future of radio is in online brands and not these radio stations that just preach about playing the best music, because who cares about the best music in a world of Spotify?
And also you look at your local stations as well. They're coming out of the shell now.
They've got personalities. I think people are missing personalities within brands. I think people are missing relevance. I always hated local radio if they'd ever mentioned that Mrs. Miggins had lost her poodle, but I always admired local radio when it made national stories relevant to its local market, because that's what I think radio is about. It's about talking about stuff that maybe everyone can talk about, but from a local perspective. Or maybe it's things that did happen locally, you can talk about them, but they have to carry significance to people's lives. I still don't think radio, even the new local stations, I don't think that people are doing it right. I don't think people are thinking about what it is to communicate and what it is to be local. I think people are trying to re-engineer models from the 80s and the 90s and make them worthy of today. And the listening landscape is profoundly different, that those models do not work and need to be rethought. Maybe we need to even, change radio, the whole thing. Radio, what is radio? How's radio different than a podcast? Are you on radio if you're on DAB? Technically, no. You're on DAB, you're not on the radio. So this terminology is starting to not stand the test of time. And I believe this is when we need the ingenuity and to change the industry, so that this is like, how is it different to podcasting? Music. So how is a talk show different to podcasting? Adverts and live. And what if you broadcast live on a network? Are you doing a radio show? No, you're doing a live broadcast. But why? Do you know what I mean? The words just don't make sense anymore. They're not standing the test of the 21st century's technological leaps. And so at some point, there will be a lot more there'll be more similarities between podcasts and radio than you can imagine now. We just need some sort of platform to bring all this together in a way that's meaningful for people who are broadcasting themselves.
My aim, actually, honestly, is to get onto more stations and become a national person and get the autism brand across, because I want more diversity in broadcasting, if you get what I mean.
Diversity is really important. I think fair representation of the society is a responsibility of society. And obviously autism is one of those things which is, it's got a level of prevalence. It's not rare. You can't turn around and say autism is rare. There's been quite a growth of it over the last 20 years as well. And so to raise awareness of that, but it's not to raise awareness of autism necessarily, is it, mate? I've been talking to you for quite a while now, and I think, it's about people understanding that autism isn't, it's more of a, I always think of these things as more of styles. It's more of a style of a person, opposed to sort of like an issue. You see the world differently than me, and therefore you'll retain different parts of the world than me. And if my understanding's right, I'll find certain ways about communication easier than you, and you'll find certain ways about observation easier than me. So we live in an interesting world, mate. And if you can bring your world to the boring neurotypicals more, then brilliant, all for it, mate. But you should not think of yourself as sort of like, I don't know, here I am searching for careful words and I don't really need them. I guess all I'm saying is keep bringing the awareness, but don't think that you are about bringing the awareness. You're about being you, but you'll just bring that awareness naturally as well.
Yeah, and I know a lot of broadcasters who have been recently diagnosed with autism. I'm trying to say that what in the world of political correctness, because we have.
I think diagnosed is fine. I listen.
I
understand all these problems.
I say suffer, but you can't say that in a world of political correctness nowadays. If you
I
get
know,
what I
and
mean.
that's because people think that, you know, suffering is victimy, or does it mean I've got a disability? But if you live in a world where you think that the world doesn't really understand who you are, then you can argue that there's an element of suffering. You suffer to be understood. So there's an element of truth in that. I think people get very tied up in words, and they like to police words and then ban words, and then certain words aren't allowed to be used anymore. The world's gone mental like that. Mental. We need to all be able to sit in a room and have a chat honestly, and not be calling each other racist and prejudice and all that, and just sort of go, cool, right, how do we all get on better? That should be literally the aim. How do we get on better, and how do we reform the top more? That's what I'd like.
Peace on earth.
Peace on earth, brother. It's coming.
Yeah.
At some point, it's coming.
Yeah, we'll just, and going on to my next question, it's question 4. Have we done how has COVID affected your
No, I
line
don't
of
think we
work?
have.
How okay, let's go for it. Question 4, how has COVID affected your life and line of work?
In terms of how has it affected my life, it's made me a better dad, actually. When the world came to a halt and there was a lot less to be doing with other people, and a lot less to be distracting myself with, it made me realize that I was quite impatient a lot of the time, naturally. And so I can't say it's all been bad. It's largely been good. It's brought me closer to the people who I want to be closer to, and put that distance between the people who I didn't want to be close to. Work-wise, it's been very difficult at times. And this will vary between voiceovers, depending on what sort of work you do. But at the time, I was doing a lot of advertising work. And as uncertainty hit in terms of, well, when's my business allowed to be open? How long is it going to be open for? Blah, 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 blah. At first, it was busy because everyone was changing their messaging, but then it got very, very quiet. And so I just changed my angle. I changed my target and started to go, right, I'm going to work with more startup stations, more people who are branding, more, you know, projects like that that attach to commercial stuff. And so I did that over about 3 months, just tied up some of my show reels, contacted small people, orientated myself in that direction. And it's been all right. We're not at pre-pandemic levels. I'm not at those levels yet. I have to work harder for, you know, essentially the jobs that I'm doing. But I feel like I'm in a better place because it did force me to really think about what I wanted more of, because, you know, that was the direction I was going to hurl myself into. So this last week, for example, I've been putting imaging demos and commercial demos and, you know, theatrical demos together. I'm making some more sounds. It's forced me to pick up some of the old skills that I wasn't relying on as much, like production, because there's not as much of those old jobs around. However, that is changing. And if that changes and gets back to what it was, and I'm left with all the work that I've been acquiring, then I'll end up in a really good position. So we'll see. We'll see. It's been humbling, mate, in a lot of ways. It's been humbling. It's been strange.
Brilliant. And we'll come on to the last question. What advice would you give to young aspiring broadcasters who are starting out?
My advice would be, don't hang your dreams on working at the biggest station in the world. because that's not what the world's going to be about. So if my advice is to someone wants to work in broadcasting and in radio, you got to understand one thing that's very different than when I was getting into radio and when I was a kid. And that is there's a radio station for everything now. And so when I was getting into radio, it was like I had to get into a radio station that essentially played 80s music and 90s music. And it was a bit too old for me. I didn't like it, but it was radio, so it was cool. Now, you could actually join a radio station that just spoke about computer games all day if you wanted to. Or if there wasn't a radio station that did that, you could set one up and then you could generate an audience without having to, go out and knock door to door. You've not got a building that you've got to cover their overheads of. You don't have to buy a whole sales team. You don't have to fit a studio out. You can literally record your show in the cloud on a cheap microphone on your laptop and start there. And then your content and what you're passionate about could gain some listenership. Say you were really passionate about judo and you did a radio show on your online radio station. It's called Judo FM. And you're on Judo FM spinning round, kicking ass and playing today's best hits, right? After about a year, you'd have some sort of audience because all you did was talk about judo. So everyone that liked judo should listen to Judo FM because it was the only radio station in the world that played kick-ass music and talked about judo. So my advice to people would be, get good at broadcasting. Like, get good at knowing what equipment you need to use, mic technique, learn to talk to yourself, learn to tell a story, right? And then apply it to the brands that you want. If you like games, go try and join a station that does games. If you like judo, do Judo FM. If Judo FM doesn't exist, set it up. But don't sit in your bedroom thinking you want your career to be the drive time presenter at KISS, because we think the world's changed in 15 years, but how the world's going to change in the next 5-10 years is going to be revolutionary. And the amount of those jobs available are going to be very, very, very small. And take it from me, jobs at the biggest stations in the world actually never feel like you think they will. There always needs to be more progression, more, better. And you find that ends up being in something you're passionate about. Otherwise, you end up chasing awards or money or other, milestones. But by feeding your own passion, that's my advice. Feed your passion and make it work in the new paradigm of radio. Set up your own radio station, have a small audience, grow the audience, and then sell sponsorship. Get judo manufacturers to give you money because everyone you sell to is a judo fan. That's why I'd say, mate, it would never be work as hard as you can, persevere, persist. Make sure that you nag people and tell them you want to work with them. Nah. You got to follow your heart. And if your heart leads you to a specific station, then great. If not, you'll find yourself where you need to be as long as you just stay on the right road.
Yeah, as I say, actually, as well, as I say, that's brilliant. Yeah, find the right road. And also my next guest is actually going to be a guy who used to work at Peak FM, actually. Rob Burney.
Rob, yeah, good old Rob. I know Rob.
But he's been out of the game for about 10 years, I think. The radio
he left
game.
Planet Rock and then he set up a graphic design agency, didn't he?
Yeah, but I'm interviewing him tomorrow.
Rob's a good guy. Hi, Rob.
He'll probably hear that, and as Primji said hello to him as well.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
I'm hopefully trying to get your dad to do one of these when he comes back off holiday in early September.
Make sure you pin him down. He's a liability, the guy.
He sounds like a sound guy to me.
He's a good guy. He's a good guy. They're all good guys. It's a good industry, really. It's a good industry. I believe as an industry, we need to sort of like grow up a little bit, pull our socks up and go, how do we evolve this thing before?
Where did you do your show? Where did you do your launch show at North Derbyshire Radio from?
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've not got a physical building. Everyone's just recording remotely.
They'll probably have somewhere very soon. One day.
Maybe. Good luck to them.
Good luck to every station that's starting
He'll
out,
be knocking
really.
on my door, wanting to hire me, no doubt. He'll be going, Chadwick, I made a mistake, mate. I made a mistake. Can you come back and be controversial for us?
Well, you could go on talk radio.
I could do. I'll probably be fired pretty quickly. My destiny, I feel, is probably within a brand that I make or on YO1.
Who knows? Your dad's in charge of YO1.
Exactly. If I've got a chance in radio, it's definitely kissing dad's ass, isn't it?
Have you seen their studio yet?
As in the studio?
The new one that they've
Yes.
just opened up.
Yes, I have, yeah.
You've been down to visit?
I have. I was there on the launch weekend a couple of weeks ago.
I'm hoping to get down there in a few months.
Oh, yeah, it's nice. It looks really good. Get them to give you a tour. They definitely will.
Because I need to talk to, because I really want to syndicate on that station. One of my friends was on the original YO1, who's a guest on this podcast very soon, Chris Johnson.
Yeah.
And he used to be part of West Yorkshire as well.
Great.
Along with Jim Coulson.
Yeah, I know that name.
He used to be part of Rosie and Jim at Viking FM before Rosie went to work with Danny Milo at Pulse.
Yeah, Jim did a show on Hallam when I was there as well.
Yeah, he has his old Hallam FM mug.
To say about, yeah, about.
Yeah, anyway, that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining me, Mark.
It's really nice to talk to you, Ben. Thanks very much for having me.
Do join me again soon for another Chatbox podcast. But for now, please give it up for the legendary Mark Chadwick. Do join me again soon for another podcast. This will be available on YouTube and my website, wix.com. But for now, thank you very much for watching and listening. And that's a wrap.